A woman stands outside a cafe window, covered head to toe in mud, waving desperately at the man waiting inside for their blind date. Her dress is ruined. Her hair hangs in muddy strands. Teenagers are laughing at her from across the street. Most men would walk away. Most would make an excuse and disappear, but when 34-year-old single father Evander Locke sees her standing there, completely humiliated and unable to come inside, what he does next doesn't just surprise her, it changes everything. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Evander Locke checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes, 7:10 p.m. The Bluebird Cafe hummed with quiet conversation around him, the smell of fresh bread and rosemary filling the air, but all he could focus on was the knot tightening in his chest. His fingers drummed against the menu he'd read 4 times already, without absorbing a single word. The window table suddenly felt too exposed, like everyone in the restaurant could see exactly what he was, a man who hadn't been on a date in 3 years, sitting alone, wondering if he'd been stood up. He glanced at the door again. Still empty. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe... Movement outside the glass caught his eye. A young woman stood just beyond the cafe entrance, visible through the glass door. She wasn't coming in. She was just standing there. And she was completely covered in mud from her knees down, with splatters across what looked like it had once been a red dress. Her blonde hair hung in damp, muddy strands around her face. Their eyes met through the glass. She started waving at him, not a casual wave, a desperate, mortified, please don't leave kind of wave. Her other hand pressed against her chest, and even from inside, Evander could see her mouth the words, "I'm so sorry." For a moment, he just stared. Then, without thinking, he stood and walked toward the door. Every instinct told him something was wrong. Not dangerous, but wrong. This woman looked like she'd been through something, and she was trying to communicate with him from outside the restaurant. The moment he stepped into the cool evening air, he heard her voice. "Elowen?" he asked gently. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. "I'm so sorry. I was literally right there." She pointed to a spot about 50 feet from the cafe with a shaking hand. "I could see the entrance. I was walking toward it, and I was so nervous about this date that I wasn't watching where I was going." She took a breath, and Evander noticed the way she was favoring her left ankle. There was this huge puddle from the rain earlier, mixed with mud from the construction site next door, and I completely wiped out. Full faceplant, like cartoon-level fall. Evander's concern deepened. He could see her scraped palms now, the way she was trying to hide them behind her back. "A bunch of teenagers saw the whole thing," Elowen said, her voice cracking. She gestured across the street where a group of kids were still filming on their phones. "They were laughing, taking videos. I wanted to disappear into the ground. And my phone." She held up a mud-caked device that looked beyond saving. "It's completely dead. I couldn't call Madison to tell you what happened. I couldn't text you. I couldn't just leave you sitting there wondering where I was. But I also couldn't walk into that nice restaurant looking like this." She gestured at herself, and Evander could see the humiliation written across every inch of her face. "I understand if you want to cancel. This is probably the worst first impression in dating history. I'm a disaster. You can just go, and I'll tell Madison it was mutual or something." "Stop," Evander said gently. Elowen looked up at him, confused. He studied her for a long moment. This woman who'd had the courage to show up despite her complete humiliation, who'd stood outside waving rather than simply running away and ghosting him, who was standing here, covered in mud, ankle clearly hurting, and still trying to be considerate of his feelings. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and gently took her muddy hand. "Come with me," he said. "What?" Elowen stared at their joined hands. "Where?" "There's a boutique 2 blocks down. Stella's place. My sister shops there all the time. They have a full powder room in the back. Let's get you cleaned up." Elowen stood frozen. You want to continue the date? After seeing this?" She gestured at her mud-covered self with her free hand. Evander smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time that evening. Accidents happen. Besides, if you had the courage to show up like this instead of standing me up, the least I can do is help you get cleaned up. Come on.
The walk to Stella's place was quiet, except for Elowen's occasional winces. Evander slowed his pace to match hers, his hand still holding hers despite the mud. "I can't believe you're not running away," Elowen said finally. "Why would I run away?" "Because I'm a mess, literally and figuratively." Evander glanced at her. "Everyone's a mess sometimes. At least you're honest about it." Something in his voice made Elowen look up at him, really look at him. There was a sadness there, buried deep beneath the kindness. Something that said he understood what it meant to fall apart. They reached the boutique, and Stella, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and silver hair, took one look at Elowen and immediately ushered them inside. "Oh, honey, what happened to you?" Stella asked. Evander explained quickly. To her credit, Stella didn't even flinch. "The bathroom's in the back," she said, pointing. "Take your time, dear. I'll get you some towels and toiletries." "I can't afford—" Elowen started. "Don't worry about it," Evander interrupted. He turned to Stella. "Can we find her something to wear? Simple is fine." "Evander, you can't buy me clothes," Elowen protested. "Consider it an investment," he said with that same gentle smile, "in what I hope will be a great evening."
20 minutes later, Elowen stood in the boutique's spacious bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror. The mud was gone, her hair was clean, and she was wearing a simple red dress, different from her ruined one, but somehow even prettier. She took a shaky breath, pressing her palms against the cool marble countertop. Her reflection looked back at her, cheeks still flushed from embarrassment, eyes still a little red from earlier tears. But beneath all that, something else. Something like wonder. This man, this stranger, had just witnessed her at her absolute worst, covered in mud, humiliated by teenagers, phone dead, limping, and instead of making an excuse and leaving, instead of being annoyed or uncomfortable, he'd bought her a dress and waited. Who does that? The thought scared her as much as it warmed her, because Elowen had been on enough bad dates to know that kindness like this was rare, kindness without expectation, kindness that showed up even when things got messy. She dated men who got irritated when she was 5 minutes late, who complained when she couldn't make dinner plans because of work. And here was someone who'd seen her fall apart literally, and his response was to help. She touched the fabric of the dress, soft cotton under her fingertips. It fit perfectly like it had been waiting for her. Through the bathroom door, she could hear Evander's voice, warm and easy, still talking with Stella about renovations and skylights. Elowen closed her eyes for a moment. "Don't mess this up," she told herself. "Whatever this is, don't mess it up." When she emerged from the bathroom, Evander was chatting with Stella near the front of the store. They were talking about architecture, something about a renovation Stella had done 2 years ago. "Evander designed the whole thing," Stella was saying. "Knocked out that wall, added the skylights, completely transformed the space." Evander turned when he heard Elowen approach. His expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough that she noticed. His smile widened, reaching his eyes. "Much better." Then, more quietly, "Though I have to say, you handled that whole situation with more grace than most people would have." Elowen felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I think falling into a mud puddle is the opposite of graceful." "I mean after," Evander said. "You could have run away. Most people would have." They thanked Stella and walked back toward the Bluebird Café. Elowen was limping slightly, and without a word, Evander offered his arm. She took it gratefully. The teenagers across the street were gone now. The puddle still sat there, muddy and treacherous, a reminder of her disaster. But somehow, walking next to Evander, it felt less humiliating and more like a story they'd tell someday. If there was a someday. The cafe was quieter now, the dinner rush winding down. Their window table was still available, and within minutes, they were seated with menus and water glasses between them. Elowen couldn't stop fidgeting with her napkin. "So," she said finally, "Madison tells me you have a daughter." The transformation in Evander was instant. His entire demeanor softened. Shoulders relaxing, eyes lighting up in a way they hadn't before. Avalie, he said. She's 7 going on 17, smart as a whip, and completely convinced she knows more about life than I do. Elowen laughed. Sounds like she might be right. She gave me a pep talk before this date, Evander admitted, pulling out his phone. He showed her a photo, a beaming little girl with his brown hair and bright green eyes, holding up a terrible magic trick with playing cards spread between her small hands. She said, "I needed to stop being scared of feelings, Daddy." Wise girl, Elowen said, studying the photo. There was so much love in that child's face, so much light. She gets it from her mother. The way Evander said it, past tense, gentle, grieving, made Elowen look up sharply. He met her eyes. Andrea passed 3 years ago. Severe asthma attack that led to respiratory failure. We were at home. She'd had asthma her whole life, managed it well. But this one, it was different. Sudden. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. Elowen's hand moved across the table instinctively, covering his. "I'm so sorry." Evander looked down at their joined hands. "Thank you. It's been a journey." Evelyn was 4 when it happened. She barely remembers her mom now, which breaks my heart some days. But she's also the reason I get up every morning. The reason I'm here tonight, actually. She encouraged you to date? For months, Evander said with a small smile. She's been very concerned about my social life. Keeps telling me that Daddy needs a friend who's not Aunt Madison. Elowen laughed, but it was gentle, understanding. That must be hard. Dating again.
Terrifying, Evander admitted. I keep wondering if I'm betraying Andrea's memory, if I'm being selfish, if I'm ready, if Evelyn's ready. Madison practically had to drag me to agree to this. And yet, here you are, Elowen said softly. That takes courage. So does showing up covered in mud. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition, the knowledge that they were both carrying things, histories, hurts, hopes. What about you? Evander asked. Madison mentioned you work at the children's library. Elowen's face brightened. I do. I run the reading programs for kids ages 5 to 12. We do story times, reading challenges, summer camps. It's my favorite thing in the world. Tell me about it. So she did. Elowen talked about the shy kids who discovered their love for books through her programs, the struggling readers who finally found stories that spoke to them, the magic of watching a child's face light up when they connected with a character for the first time. There's this one boy, Marcus. He's 8, and he hated reading when he first came to our program. His parents were so worried. But I found this graphic novel series about dragons, and now he reads 3 books a week. His mom cried when she thanked me. Evander watched her talk, watched the passion animate her features. You love what you do. I really do. Kids they're honest. They don't pretend. They show you exactly who they are and what they need. Adults could learn from that.
The conversation flowed effortlessly after that. Hours passed without either of them noticing. They talked about Evander's architectural firm, about the homes he designed, the way he tried to create spaces that felt like safety. Elowen shared about growing up in a small town, about losing her own father to cancer when she was 16, about understanding grief in a way most people her age didn't. Is that why you work with kids? Evander asked gently. Elowen paused. Maybe. I think I know what it's like to need someone to show up for you, and I want to be that person for them. By the time they left the restaurant, it was nearly 11. I know tonight didn't start the way either of us planned, but I'm really glad you waved me outside instead of leaving. Me too, Elowen admitted, though I'm definitely wearing sneakers on our second date. Evander's expression shifted. Hopeful. Vulnerable. Second date? If you're interested, after seeing me at my absolute worst, I'm very interested. They stood there for a moment, neither quite wanting to leave. Finally, Elowen stopped a taxi. Good night, Evander. Good night, Elowen. The taxi drove away, and Evander stood on the sidewalk watching the taillights disappear, feeling something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope.
But life, as it often does, had other plans. The second date had to be postponed when Evander came down with the flu. Evander texted Elowen apologetically. His daughter was running a fever and throwing up, and he couldn't leave her with anyone. "Don't apologize. Take care of your girl. We'll reschedule." The third attempt was derailed by a work emergency for Elowen. The children's library had a burst pipe that flooded the kids' section, destroying dozens of books. She spent 3 days salvaging what she could and organizing donations. "I'm so sorry. Rain check?" "Of course. Let me know when things settle down."
It was 3 weeks before they finally managed to meet again. 3 weeks of texts that turned into phone calls that sometimes lasted past midnight. 3 weeks of learning about each other in fragments, favorite books, childhood memories, fears about the future. When they finally sat down for coffee on a Wednesday afternoon while Aveline was at school, it felt less like a second date and more like coming home. "I missed you," Evander said simply. Elowen's smile was radiant. "I missed you too." They didn't rush after that. Both understood that this, whatever this was becoming, needed time, needed care. Evander was cautious about bringing someone new into Aveline's life, and Elowen respected that completely. "Take your time," she told him one night on the phone. "I'm not going anywhere." It was 2 months before Elowen met Aveline. 2 months of careful dates, of Evander slowly learning to open his heart again, and Elowen proving through patience and consistency that she meant what she said. They met at a casual lunch spot, nothing formal, nothing that would put pressure on a 7-year-old. Elowen showed up with a canvas bag full of books from the library, carefully selected based on everything Evander had told her about his daughter. Aveline walked in holding her father's hand, eyeing Elowen with the kind of serious suspicion only children can master. They sat down, ordered food, made small talk about the weather and the menu. And then, barely 5 minutes in, Aveline looked directly at Elowen. "And are you Daddy's girlfriend?" "Aveline," Evander exclaimed, mortified. But Elowen laughed, genuinely laughed. "I'm your daddy's friend. Is that okay?" Aveline studied her with sharp green eyes. "Do you like magic tricks?" "I love them," said Elowen seriously, "but I'm terrible at figuring them out."
"Perfect," Aveline declared, her entire face transformed, lighting up with excitement. "Because I'm really good at them, and I don't like when people guess too fast. It ruins it." She proceeded to perform her entire repertoire. Card tricks, coin tricks, one truly terrible disappearing napkin trick that involved her just shoving it under the table. Elowen watched each one with rapt attention, gasping at all the right moments, declaring herself completely stumped. Evander watched them both, his heart doing something complicated and wonderful in his chest. After lunch, as they walked to their cars, Aveline reached up and took Elowen's hand. "You're nice. You can come to dinner at our house." Elowen looked at Evander, who shrugged with a helpless smile. "I'd love to," Elowen said. 8 months passed. 8 months of slow, careful building. Of family dinners where Elowen learned that Aveline hated green beans but loved broccoli, that she had nightmares about sharks, and that she still slept with a stuffed elephant named Mr. Trunks. 8 months of Saturday mornings at the farmer's market. One particular Saturday in June stood out, the sun warm but not oppressive, the market bustling with early summer produce. Aveline had insisted on picking out flowers for their kitchen table, spending 20 minutes debating between sunflowers and daisies before declaring they needed both. "We have 2 hands," she'd reasoned with perfect 7-year-old logic, "1 bouquet for each hand." Elowen had laughed and bought both bunches, letting Aveline carry the sunflowers while she took the daisies. They'd walked through the market like that, Evander carrying the produce bags, Aveline and Elowen with their flowers, looking for all the world like a family.
"Ice cream?" Aveline had asked hopefully at the end. "It's 10 in the morning," Evander had protested. "Saturday rules," Aveline countered. "Saturday rules say ice cream time is whenever we want." Elowen had sided with Aveline, and they'd ended up on a park bench eating ice cream cones, strawberry for Aveline, vanilla for Evander, chocolate for Elowen, while Aveline taught them a new magic trick involving a disappearing quarter. It was ordinary, beautifully, perfectly ordinary, and Evander had realized, watching Elowen help Aveline practice the trick, that this was what he wanted forever. It wasn't perfect. There were hard moments. One night, Aveline had a meltdown, a real devastating one, where she sobbed for her mother, screaming that she wanted Mommy back, that nothing was right without her. Elowen had been there for dinner. She'd immediately stepped back, given them space, left quietly while Evander held his daughter and let her grieve. She texted him later, "I'm here if you need me. No pressure." There were awkward moments with Andrea's parents, who struggled to see Evander moving forward, who looked at Elowen with something between resentment and confusion, as if her presence somehow erased their daughter. Evander had been firm, gentle but firm. "Andrea will always be Aveline's mother, always, but I'm allowed to be happy again, and Elowen makes me happy." Elowen had her own fears. Late-night worries about becoming an instant mother figure, about whether she was good enough, patient enough, loving enough for a child who'd already lost so much. "What if I mess this up?" she asked Evander one night. "Then we'll figure it out together," he said simply. But through it all, through the challenges and the awkwardness and the fears, their connection deepened. Evander fell in love with Elowen's patience, her genuine affection for Aveline, her terrible cooking but enthusiastic attempts to improve, the way she showed up again and again, even when things got messy. Elowen fell in love with Evander's dedication as a father, his quiet strength, the way he still honored Andrea's memory while making space for new happiness, the way he looked at her like she was something precious, the way he made her feel safe.
The proposal came on a random Tuesday in March. Evander had planned elaborate proposals twice. The first involved a sunset picnic by the lake, complete with a hidden photographer and Aveline holding a sign that said, "Will you be my new mom?" But a thunderstorm rolled in an hour before they were supposed to leave. The second attempt involved reservations at Andrea's favorite restaurant, a way of honoring the past while stepping into the future. But Aveline got sick again, and they had to cancel. Finally, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, Evander stopped trying to make it perfect. Elowen was sitting at the kitchen table, helping Aveline with her math homework, her brow furrowed as she tried to remember how to do long division. Evander was making spaghetti and listening to them debate whether the answer was 42 or 47. The kitchen was warm, filled with the smell of garlic bread in the oven and the sound of Aveline's pencil scratching against paper. Outside, the March wind rattled the windows, but inside, everything felt safe. Settled. Right. He turned around, spatula in his sauce-covered hand, and the words just came out. "Marry me." The kitchen went silent. Elowen looked up, startled. "What?" "Marry me," Evander repeated. He walked over, completely forgetting about the sauce dripping onto his hardwood floor. "I had plans. I had rings picked out. I had this whole thing prepared. But watching you two right now, I realize this is it. This is our life. Our beautiful, messy, ordinary life. And I want it forever. I want Tuesday nights with math homework and jarred spaghetti sauce. I want your terrible cooking and Aveline's magic tricks, and your laugh when she outsmarts both of us. I want all of it. Marry me, Elowen." "Daddy, you're getting sauce on the floor," Aveline pointed out.
"Say yes," Evander told Elowen, "and I'll clean it up." Elowen stood, her chair scraping back. Tears were already streaming down her face. "Yes! Yes? Yes, of course yes!" She crossed the kitchen and threw her arms around him, not caring about the sauce on his hands, or the mess on the floor, or the fact that Aveline was now cheering at the top of her lungs. "Finally!" Aveline shouted. "Can I be the flower girl? Can I wear a peach dress? Can we have chocolate cake instead of vanilla? Because vanilla is boring." Evander and Elowen pulled apart just enough to look at each other, both laughing and crying at the same time. "We're getting married," Elowen whispered. "We're getting married," Evander confirmed. Aveline wedged herself between them, wrapping her small arms around both their waists. "We're gonna be a real family, like official and everything." "We already are a family," Evander said, looking down at his daughter. "This just makes it official." The wedding was 6 weeks later, held in Evander's backyard on a perfect May afternoon. They didn't want to wait, didn't see the point in elaborate planning when they already knew exactly what they wanted: each other, their family, their friends, and a celebration that felt like them.
The backyard was transformed with white chairs and string lights and wildflowers that Eveline had helped pick out. There were maybe 40 people, close friends, family, co-workers who'd become like family. Madison stood as Eveline's maid of honor, giving a speech that had everyone laughing about being the world's best matchmaker, despite the muddy beginning. When Evander told me about the mud puddle, I thought, well, that's it. He's going to cancel. But he didn't, because my brother has always had a gift for seeing what really matters. And Elowen, you matter. You've always mattered.
Evelyn took her flower girl duties incredibly seriously, creating a perfect petal path in her peach dress, her face set in fierce concentration. When Elowen walked down the makeshift aisle, Evelyn whispered, loud enough for the front rows to hear, "You look like a princess." The ceremony was short and sweet. They'd written their own vows. Evander went first. "Elowen, when I met you, I was convinced I'd never feel this way again, that love was something I'd had once and lost, and that was my story. But you showed me that hearts are bigger than we think, that there's room for honoring what was while embracing what is. You showed up covered in mud and waving at me through a window, and somehow that was exactly what I needed. Someone brave enough to be vulnerable, kind enough to be patient, and strong enough to love not just me, but my daughter too. I promise to keep showing up for you, to choose you every day, to build a life with you that honors our past while creating our future." Elowen's voice shook as she began. "Evander, I fell into a mud puddle on our first date, and instead of walking away, you held out your hand. That's who you are. Someone who shows up when things get messy. Someone who leads with kindness. Someone who makes space for people to be imperfect and still worthy of love. You and Evelyn taught me what family really means. It's not perfection. It's showing up. It's choosing each other. It's magic tricks at the dinner table and spaghetti sauce on the floor and Tuesday nights that feel like home. I promise to keep showing up for both of you, to be patient when things are hard, to celebrate every ordinary moment, to love you both with everything I have." When they kissed, Evelyn cheered so loudly that several people jumped.
The reception was exactly what they wanted. Casual, warm, full of laughter. There was dancing and terrible cake. Aveline had been right about chocolate being better. And toasts that ranged from funny to deeply moving. As the sun began to set and the string lights came on, casting everything in a golden glow, Elowen called Evander aside. "I have a wedding gift for you," she said, looking nervous in a way that made his heart skip. "Elowen, you marrying me is gift enough. Well, this is something extra." She took his hands and placed them gently on her stomach. "In about 7 months, Aveline's going to be a big sister." The world stopped. Evander stood frozen, his eyes widening as the words sunk in. We're... I found out 3 days ago. I wanted to wait until today to tell you. I know we didn't plan this, and I know it's fast, and if you're not ready..." Evander cut her off by dropping to his knees. He pressed his forehead against her stomach, his hands gentle on her waist, and Elowen could feel the baby shaking. "Hello, little one. I'm your daddy, and I already love you so much." Elowen ran her fingers through his hair, her own tears falling freely now. "You're happy?" He looked up at her. "I'm happy." "What's going on?" Evander asked. Aveline had appeared beside them, her peach dress smudged with frosting from the cake. "Why is Daddy on the ground? Are you okay?" Evander pulled his daughter into a hug, bringing Elowen into it too. "How do you feel about being a big sister?" For a moment, Aveline just stared at them, processing, understanding.
And then she screamed. A shriek of pure joy so loud that the entire reception turned to look. "I'm going to be a big sister! I'm going to teach them everything. Magic tricks and reading and how to make the perfect peanut butter sandwich. Can we name them something cool, like Dragon or Sparkle? When are they coming? Do I get to hold them? Can they sleep in my room?" Evander and Elowen laughed through their tears, holding each other and their daughter, their family expanding in the most beautiful way. If you believe in second chances and beautiful new beginnings, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Later that night, after Aveline had finally crashed from excitement and been carried to bed by her Aunt Madison, after most of the guests had left and only a few close friends remained cleaning up, Evander and Elowen slow danced alone in their backyard under the string lights. The music was soft, the night was warm. Everything felt perfect in a way that had nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with presence. "You know," Elowen said, her head resting on Evander's shoulder, "I'm glad I fell in that mud puddle." Evander pulled back just enough to look at her. "Best thing that ever happened to us. Though maybe don't make it a tradition." She laughed, and the sound filled the quiet night. "No promises. I'm pretty clumsy." "Hey, that's fair." They swayed together, and Evander's hand drifted to her stomach, still flat, but holding their future. "I can't believe we're having a baby," he whispered. "Believe it, you're stuck with me now." "I've been stuck with you since you waved at me through that window," Evander said. "I just didn't know it yet." The stars were out now, visible between the string lights, scattered across the dark sky like promises. The music shifted to something slower, sweeter, and they moved with it, lost in each other and the moment, and the life they were building together. Across the yard, Aveline had snuck back outside in her pajamas. She was supposed to be asleep, but she stood at the back door watching her father and Elowen dance, a smile on her small face. In her hand was a quarter. She was practicing her newest magic trick, the one where she made it disappear and reappear behind someone's ear. She'd been perfecting it for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to show Elowen. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she'd show her new mom the best magic trick yet. Because that's what Elowen was now. Not replacing her first mom. Aveline understood that. Her first mom would always be her first mom, the one in the pictures, the one Daddy talked about with that soft, sad voice sometimes. But Elowen was here. Elowen read bedtime stories, and laughed at terrible jokes, and didn't get mad when Aveline accidentally spilled juice on the carpet. Elowen was having a baby, her baby brother or sister. Elowen was family. And that, Aveline thought, as she watched her parents dance, was the best magic of all. Their love story hadn't been instant. It hadn't been perfect. It had been earned through patience, through showing up even when life got messy, through choosing each other again and again. Elowen had shown up covered in mud, vulnerable and humiliated, and Evander had held out his hand.
They'd shown up for each other through postponed dates and sick kids and grief that didn't follow a timeline, through awkward family dinners and fears about the future and late-night conversations that lasted until dawn. They'd shown up for Aveline, creating space for her to grieve her mother while accepting new love, teaching her that hearts can hold multiple truths at once. Missing someone and loving someone new aren't mutually exclusive. And now, dancing under string lights, with their daughter watching from the doorway and new life growing between them, they were showing up for their future. A future built on Tuesday nights and math homework and terrible cooking, on magic tricks and bedtime stories and mud puddles that became metaphors, on love that wasn't dramatic or perfect, but was real and patient and kind, on choosing each other every single day. Evander spun Elowen gently, and her laugh rang out across the backyard. In that moment, surrounded by the remains of their wedding reception and the warmth of string lights and the promise of tomorrow, everything felt complete. Not because there wouldn't be more challenges, not because life suddenly became easy, but because they'd learned the secret that only some people ever figure out. Love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who shows up. Someone who holds out their hand when you're covered in mud. Someone who stays when things get hard. Someone worth choosing again and again and again. And as Aveline finally gave up on sneaking and ran across the yard to join them, throwing her small arms around both their parents, their family felt complete. Complete with one more miracle on the way. Thank you for being here with us on this journey. If this story reminded you that beautiful things can come from messy beginnings, don't forget to subscribe and share the love. See you in the next story.